And she goes, some lady got lost on that section of trail. And immediately I knew who the fuck she was talking about because
you obsessively read about people who get lost and listen to podcasts about people who get lost and eaten.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. I was so frazzled. Like, normally I'm super polite, but I was so frazzled. I cut her off. I was like, Kathy Fry?
Welcome to This Fucking Trail, home to brutally honest takes on Texas trails, hiking, hilarity, and all things adventure-y. I'm your MC, John, and I'm here to warn you that this podcast is not suitable for young children or anyone with a sensitivity to swears or strong opinions. And now over to your host. She's a bitch, she's a lover, she's a hiker, she's a mother. That's right, I'm talking about my wife, Gabrielle.
Yep, that's me. Today is a trip report episode, an episode in which I review my most recent trips, complete with trials, tribulations, mistakes made, lessons learned, and adventures had. These episodes are meant to be a source of inspiration and education for anyone looking to take a similar trip. Enjoy!
Gabrielle, we have a heck of an adventure to talk about this time. You recently abandoned me for a week to explore the great wilds of Big Bend, and I definitely had a great time playing a lot of video games while you were gone, so thanks for doing that.
You're welcome. I think the important thing to focus on here is that I came back.
That probably is something that I should maybe take note of and appreciate a little bit. So let's talk about anything else. Specifically, let's talk a little bit about what this trip was, where you went, why you went, and maybe kind of give a little preview of what we're in for today.
Yeah, so I've been to a lot of places in Texas, camping, backpacking, exploring, but the one place I hadn't had the balls to get to by myself yet was Big Bend Ranch State Park. Now, you and I have been there, twice now, I think.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, and it's fantastic, and I always love going with you, with friends, but it always felt too intimidating to go to by myself until I kind of started running out of places to go explore, and I decided, you know what? I just need to pull my big girl panties on and get the fuck out to Big Bend Ranch State Park by myself.
Yeah, I will. For anyone listening that has not been to Big Bend Ranch State Park, the way that I would compare it to other parks, and I've been to a fair number, both in Texas and a few in other states as well, I would say it is perhaps the most remote experience that I've had. And I think if you're to look at your options for state parks in Texas, I feel like you could make a strong argument to say that Big Bend Ranch, many of the trails that you can encounter out there or the roads that you can encounter, these are going to be some of the most wild, most unreliably mapped, most adventure-y feeling places that you will ever go. You could go hours without another living soul existing within miles of you, much less you see in one.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't encounter any other hikers on the trails. And come to think of it, I don't think when you and I have been out there hiking that we have ever passed other hikers.
We've seen vehicles at trailheads, and I think that is the most that I can say. Like, aside from, when you're driving past campsites, you might see some people. Otherwise, we kind of go out of our way. We don't necessarily do like the most obvious trails every time, but we did a number of trails in sort of the central main area of the park. And yeah, I don't think we did encounter anyone else on those trails.
Yeah, I definitely think among the Texas state parks, it's absolutely the most wild, the most remote, the most challenging in many aspects. I think maybe the only other place that could come close to rivaling it is Black Gap, but that's a wilderness management area. So if we're being really anal, that is not a state park.
Right. Yeah, there are definitely lots of other places that are probably comparably wild. It's just, if you're narrowing the list to state parks, it's a competition I think I've got to give to the Big Bend Ranch. Well, okay, so you went out there solo to this place that we have just elaborated on how remote and wild it is. So just, let's talk a little bit about the planning maybe of this trip and some of the preparation that you did, because I know that you spent a lot of time planning and preparing for this as you do for all of your trips?
Oh my gosh, I spent so much time, effort, and agonizing over this trip plan because I wanted to get it right. I know that there's a lot of risks out being in such a remote place all by myself. So I wanted to make sure I had a fun, but also a smart and safe plan. And so I don't even know how many hours I spent staring at paper maps, at Gaia, zooming in on all this topographical information, thinking about the hikes that you and I had done out there to come up with what I deemed was a fun, but also reasonably safe experience for me. So, my kind of A hike out there was I had planned to do a backpacking loop. There are a lot of fantastic campsites out there. But the bad thing is, you really have to have a high clearance four-wheel drive vehicle, and we just don't have that. And honestly, I think even if we had it, I don't know that I'd go out on those roads by myself. But I guess that's a conversation for when we get our Jeep.
Right.
But anyhow, so I was kind of limited as far as where I could actually go. And so if I really wanted to get out there and experience the park, I knew I was going to have to backpack since I couldn't drive to all these campsites.
Yeah, speaking of a Jeep, make sure you like, subscribe, and when the option comes to support financially, consider that. Anyways,
So yeah, what I wanted to do, I wanted to get on some trails that you and I had been on our last trip to Big Bend. We had gone to the Mexicano Falls and we had gone to the West Rim Overlook, and both of
right.
those hikes were phenomenal. But I realized I could make a loop with them and explore some trails I hadn't been on. I could go up the canyon to the base of Mexicano Falls, which I had thought would be really cool to do. And so it felt a little less scary to go on some trails that you and I had already been on, looping them together with some unknowns. And the trail to Mexicano Falls, I was really nervous about because you and I had some issues with route finding, not on the way to the falls, but going back. And so I knew
Right.
I didn't want to go back on that trail.
Yeah, that was definitely a pretty challenging area. The terrain is rough. The direction that you have to go in is a bit counterintuitive. It sort of feels like the wrong direction, as I recall. And, it's a very rocky area and you're navigating by cairns. So just, think about that. You're looking for stacks of rocks on a rocky hillside. It's not exactly the easiest navigational situation to be in. I was confident we were going in more or less the right direction, but I was also pretty confident that we were not on the trail when we were out there together.
Yeah.
And it took some hunting.
It really did, which kind of really threw me for a loop since you are such a great navigator. Never occurred to me that we would get off trail and then have difficulty actually finding the trail when I was with you. So that was a real eye opener for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think ultimately, like, we would have made it back one way or the other. I was very happy to have some backups. As much as I have occasionally in the past downplayed the necessity of them, it is nice to have Gaia GPS available.
And I had it running.
You did, and having that track to backtrack on certainly did, speed things up. And of course, it's always nice to have the bivy stick handy as well, just in case. Yeah, I don't think we've ever come even remotely close to feeling like we might need to use it, but it is very comforting to have in the back pocket.
For sure. So after staring at these maps for hours, I realized I could create a loop where I went down the Mexicano Falls Trail and I didn't have to go up because I would loop it with a different trail. And I thought I was absolutely brilliant for being able to cover the ground I wanted to cover in a way that I felt was safe.
Yeah, and you did. You spent. I think there were literally weeks where, like, our coffee table and countertops had notebooks and maps covering them, and it was always kind of fun to see, what was the latest agonizing detail that you were going back and forth on. But let's set that aside. Let's set the planning phase aside here. I think it's time to get to the part, because the reason I asked you about the planning phase is I wanted to set up what happens next.
Yeah.
So you've spent all this time and effort and you drive 8.5, 9 hours. I don't remember which side you went in on, but a very long time, from where we're at to get out to Big Bend Ranch again. Again, one of the most remote places you can go in Texas. And you get there, and as a responsible backpacker, you go to talk to the rangers.
Well, yeah, and actually, I needed to talk to the rangers because I was going to need what's called a special use permit to do my plan. But part of how I had planned my route was using a map that one of the state park rangers at the Sausalito Ranger Station gave to us in January of 2024 when we were out there.
Right.
I based all of my information off of this map because the fucking ranger gave it to me. Like, why would I even think twice about it, right?
Well, yeah, you hope you can trust park rangers.
So when I checked in at Barton Warnock, I very proudly popped out this map that I had been using, sprawled it over the counter, grabbed my trip plans, pulled them out, and was like, hey, I think I need a special use permit. And oh, I'm also checking in for a bunch of other campsites. And she goes, okay, what is it that you want to do for this backpacking trip? And so on my map, I start tracing my finger in this loop that I want to do. And she kind of is looking at it and she goes, those trails don't connect. And very clearly on my map, they fucking connect.
Right.
And where they don't connect is coming up from the Fresno Canyon up to the West Rim Overlook, is what this ranger was telling me. But I'm like, look at my damn map. It connects. And she pushes my map to the side to show the Big Bend exploration map that she has displayed on her counter, which I'm familiar with this map. We have a copy of it. But it's so big, you can't see very much topographical information. The trails aren't labeled. Like, you have no fucking idea. You're like, oh, there's a trail right there, but I have no idea what it's called because it's such a large scale that they kind of just mark the trails. Like, you can't plan a trip or navigate off of it.
Right. Yeah, I think you could use it to sort of get a general idea of like, oh, there's some interesting stuff in this region. I'd like to, maybe zoom in on a smaller, more focused map and plan some hikes there. And so I think it's great for those purposes. But yeah, if you're actually trying to navigate while you're on the trail, you don't want that map. It's not helpful.
So the map that I was using, that the ranger at Sausalito had given me, was at a scale of 1 to 24,000. Did I say that right?
Yes. Yeah, that's a pretty standard navigational map size.
So she scoots my trip map away and she shows me on her big one. And sure enough, on her fucking big map, they don't connect.
Right.
And I push my map back over. I'm like, no, they connect. Look. And so that's when she kind of, and I'm getting so flustered. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about here, lady? I didn't say that, but that's what I'm thinking. And she starts to actually look at my map and she goes, I've never seen this map before. Where did you get it? And I'm like about to lose my shit here because I'm like, oh my God, this is your fucking map. Like, how do you not know what this map is?
Right. Well, you got it from a ranger. So
I got it from a ranger in the interior of the park. And so to clarify, Barton Warnock is on the exterior of the park. And so they're not like in the heart of the park where things are a lot more wild, a lot more remote, a lot more rugged. But I don't know. I assume that sometimes they go into the interior, but it's a very different world at Barton Warnock and the trails that you can access from Barton Warnock Ranger Station from the trails that you can access at the Sausalito Ranger Station, which is, you have to drive 18 miles of unpaved road to even get to the Sausalito Ranger Station. Anyhow, she grabs the map and she goes, this is an old map. And, she's looking for a date and she found a date. I can't remember what it was. It was like 2010 or 2006. I don't know. It was old. She's like, it's out of date. And I'm like, no, Ranger at Sausalito gave it to me in 2024. And so she walks to the back where I can't see her and I hear her ask somebody, have you ever seen this map before? And I hear an indistinct male voice say something. And she comes out and she's like, this isn't up to date. It's not accurate anymore. And I'm like freaking out here. And she goes, some lady got lost on that section of trail. And immediately I knew who the fuck she was talking about because
you obsessively read about people who get lost and listen to podcasts about people who get lost and eaten.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. I was so frazzled. Like, normally I'm super polite, but I was so frazzled. I cut her off. I was like, Kathy Fry? And she's like, yeah. Because I have read extensively the story of Kathy Fry. This lady was not prepared. She intended to hike, I think, in the national park and ended up at the state park for reasons I don't remember. But anyhow, she gets lost out on this section of trail that I wanted to go to for 5 days. She survives the ordeal. Her story is like fantastic, amazing. But I she didn't bring enough water. They had a map worse than the Big Bend exploration map. Like, they had a cartoon map, basically, that had no detail.
Right, like one of those park maps where it's really to show you where the campsites are and to like
Yes.
list the amenities. It's not even a hiking map.
Yes. And so if you read her story, it's entirely user error. I think that what happened to them happened to them. And I'm super glad that she survived and her story is amazing and inspiring.
I mean, it inspires you to not take a really bad map out there.
It helps you believe that if you get lost in the desert, you can maybe survive
That's
5
true.
days
That's
in
true.
the desert.
I'm a little cynical.
But anyhow, I couldn't believe that they would close or they would stop maintaining. She said they stopped maintaining the section of trail after this lady got lost. And I was like, it was completely her fault. And she's like, I agree with you. But, they stopped maintaining it. And I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, and I think you maybe spoke a little out of turn.
I did. Like I said, I'm normally very polite and I wasn't swearing at the ranger, but I was like, oh my gosh, fuck, fuck, fuck. What am I going to do? What the fuck am I going to do? So absolutely not swearing at her. But I was definitely dropping some F bombs in the vicinity of this ranger. And I feel bad for that because I wasn't mad at her and I don't think I communicated that. But, I was upset with the situation and she obviously knew that.
Right, right. Okay. Well, so you're kind of stuck, and I think you said you talked to the trail ranger, like their trails
Yeah.
expert.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, I need a minute to like figure out what the hell I'm going to do here. So I grab all of my maps and my folder with all of my trail plans. Like, I have every document under the sun with me. I am so prepared for this hike, but I grab all my stuff and go over to a table and like kind of dazedly stare at the map. And she sends out, I don't remember his official title, but he was their trail ranger who like is in charge of maintaining their trails. And he's like, yeah, it's not maintained. It does connect, but it hasn't been maintained. Kind of talking me through it. And I was like, okay, well, what do you mean by not maintained? Because my husband and I had a hard time on the Mexicano trail, like coming back. Like, I really don't want to have to go out and back on that trail. And he goes, oh, we've done some maintenance on there. I think that you're going to see it's different. And I was like, okay. And he even like printed out a Google Earth picture of if I wanted to do my original plan and do this loop, he's like, this is what you'd be looking for. I think you'd be fine. It literally was like a mile of trail that I hadn't done that I was unsure about that
Right.
hasn't been maintained. So it was wildly frustrating, especially from what he was telling me and what I could see on this picture. I'm like, I think I can do it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think maybe if you hadn't been alone, if we had both been out there, maybe we would have talked about it a little more. But I don't know. Those unmaintained trails out in Big Bend Ranch are very unmaintained in places.
In our experience, sometimes the regular trails you have a hard time route finding. And so my experience has been that it is difficult to navigate in Big Bend. And so if you haven't maintained a trail in 15 years, I have no idea what that looks like.
Yeah.
But yes, I think if you'd been with me, absolutely, we would have done it. And we're going to go and do it together because now we fucking have to.
Well, the good news is I feel super confident I can go in a straight line for a mile. But
Wow. Thanks for the little jab there.
hey, you're the one who keeps talking up my navigational skills. That's a surprisingly hard feat to accomplish, right? Like we've done adventure races where I've landed us, directly within feet of an area using just a map and a compass. So I do feel pretty confident that.
You've also fucked up multiple times, but
Well,
we'll talk about that on another
yes,
podcast
that's
episode.
discussion for another day. Well, no further acknowledgement of that at this time. Okay, so I mean that's it, right? Like you have to sort of revamp your plans.
Yeah, but I spent, weeks and months preparing. All of a sudden, in 30 minutes, I have to decide what to do. So I kind of just decided I would do Mexicano as an out and back, and I would have to save the West Rim overlook for another day. And so I got my permit, got all checked in with the ranger. And as I was leaving, I thought I was being kind of a funny smartass and also kind of like, yo, this is a Texas state park. We're supposed to be better than the national parks, right? Because that's national. Texas is fiercely, I don't know what you want to call it, proud, independent, freedom loving, whatever. And So I said, y'all should talk to the national park. People keep dying on their trails and they don't close them.
Yeah.
And she didn't even crack a smile.
Yeah, she thought you were real funny.
I thought I was real funny.
Okay, well, I think we've talked enough about planning and getting there and everything going wrong. Well, not everything, but just your plans.
Yeah, no big deal. I do real well adapting to unexpected situations.
Right. Yeah, you're totally unfazed when your entire plan hangs on a linchpin that turns out to be false. Never throws you off your game.
No, I'm real go with the flow. My friends say I am chill as chill can be.
Yeah, that's how they describe you. Okay, well let's talk a little bit about changing plans and what you ended up actually doing. And let's talk about the trails.
Yeah, so I was really unsettled after all of this change. But my original plan, and the one that I got to carry out, was that I was going to drive to a campsite called Rancho Viejo. And that was just, I don't remember, I think it was about 5 miles into the interior of the park. And again, when I say interior of the park, that is a dirt road that's graded. I don't know. Why do you think they grade it?
So that it stays drivable? I don't know.
It's horrible. It rattles your teeth. Like, it really wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't graded. But anyhow, I was driving like 10 miles an hour at the most. This posted speed limit, I think, is 25 miles an hour, or maybe it's 20. But I was so scared I was going to pop a tire and have to change a tire and then not be able to drive out of Big Bend, maybe because the spare snow, I don't know, whatever. And kind of the unique thing about the campsites at Big Bend is that most of them are individual. And so what that means is there'll be roads that branch off the main park road and you drive to your campsite, and that is just your campsite.
Right.
It's not a group campsite. There's nobody else within miles. And I think that's something that's really, really unique to Big Bend, because that's normally a feature you have to backpack for. But these are drive up sites intended for you to get to in your car.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's been the most fun about visiting Big Bend is you go out to this site and each site is like a solid mile from the nearest site at least. There's almost none of these sites that you can even see another campsite from. Even if you climb up on a hill, like there's still nothing but desert and mountains anywhere that you can look. So it is very cool. It's very cool that they keep them isolated like that. It's one of the big appeals.
Yeah, I love that. So, Rancho Viejo is one of the campsites that you can get to in just a regular ass car. It was only about half a mile off of the main park road, so I got to it really easily. But I'm coming off of having to change my plans and trying to go with the punches, and I'm not doing very well with that. So, I get there and I'm like freaked out to be so alone.
Right.
And of course, I'm thinking about, well, what if somebody comes up on my car and, I don't know, robs me, rapes me, kills me, whatever? Like, I am totally alone and totally helpless, except for my bear spray and my neck knife. But it's a little unsettling to be out there all by yourself when you're not feeling like you're on your A game.
Well, and I believe Rancho Viejo also has a windmill nearby that is super squeaky.
Yes, I think I read in the description that I had a windmill. It didn't occur to me that it was a fucking functioning windmill that's pumping water into this big water tank. It was disgusting, but it was very squeaky. And so as I'm out there eating my dinner and trying to get my life back together and figure out my plans, all I can hear is this creepy squeak, squeak, squeak. And it's very intermittent because, right, it starts to spin when the wind blows. And so there will be pauses. There's no rhyme or rhythm to it. So I was very glad to be sleeping in my car and not in a tent, because I think that would have made me batshit crazy.
Yeah, nothing like sitting out alone in the middle of the desert in the dark with a windmill squeaking intermittently in the night to just set your teeth on edge. Even if it doesn't creep you out, it's going to annoy the piss out of you. And I think it managed to do both.
It did. And just like of note, if you ever go out to Big Bend Ranch State Park, that is not the only campsite with a windmill. So just read the campsite descriptions before you book your site.
Yeah. I think you probably want to plan to be car camping, or maybe bring some noise canceling headphones or earbuds if you're going to be trying to sleep near one of those windmills. I've been past a few of those during the day, and they are pretty loud.
And Big Bend is a really windy place. Like,
It
there's
is.
almost always wind out at the state park.
All right. Well, enough about the windmill. So let's move on. You're super creeped out, but you sleep.
I did sleep. Yep. Nobody came and killed me. I survived the night. I got up really early and started to drive because even though I was partially in the interior of the park, I think it was set to take me more than an hour to get to my trailhead. So I got up in the dark. Basically, I didn't even get dressed. I just got into the front seat of the car and started driving because I knew I was going to stop at the ranger station. And I figured, oh, I can get dressed there where I can actually wash my hands and put in my contacts in a hygienic fashion. And then keep going to my trailhead.
Yeah. So just driving in your PJs.
Yes.
To be clear, what not getting dressed means.
Oh, yes. I was not in my birthday suit. I mean, somebody could have come up on me in the middle of the night, and I'm not going to let them find me in my birthday suit.
All right. If you're gonna get killed, you're gonna do it fully dressed.
Absolutely.
Anyways, you do make it to where you're going. You stop by Sauceda Ranger Station on your way to Puerto Chillicote.
Yes, that's where I put on my hiking clothes, got my contacts in, snagged a little bit of Wi-Fi real quick so I could text you all my freak out messages.
Yes, I remember those. You head on to Puerto Chillicote, and you get there. And what's the hike for the first day?
So I was gonna do the Mexicano Falls Trail, and then I was gonna go a little bit past Mexicano and go down to the Falls Trailhead for the 4x4 road. I was gonna go see a bunch of overlooks that overlook the Chorro Vista area. I had even originally planned to go check out Madrid Falls. Like, I was gonna be a legit real explorer with my original plans. And I still intended to go do the overlooks. I knew I probably wasn't going to make it to Madrid Falls, but I wanted to do the overlooks. But I get to the Puerto Chilicote trailhead where I parked. It was really cold. It was really windy. I'm not feeling this hike at all. I'm going along. It's really easy to find the way. Like, honestly, until you come out of the Arroyo Mexicano, that's where the terrain starts to get a little bit more challenging and where I knew we had had some trouble before. But the trail was really easy and really, as far as like physically easy and easy to follow up until there. But I just wasn't having a great time. My heart wasn't singing. And you know how I feel about singing hearts.
Well, yeah, you gotta have them. And also, there's so much. It's so much harder to get into that headspace when you've been thrown off by things going awry previously, which is a problem that we've had in Big Bend Ranch State Park and Big Bend National Park on a couple of occasions.
Yeah, so once I got out of the Arroyo Mexicano, I really started to pay attention to the terrain. I knew, somewhere along that section is where you and I had difficulty. So I kind of popped up out of there and started walking toward the falls. But then I turned around and memorized the features of where the trail starts to descend. So, if I got off trail, if I just got close to getting back there, I would see these features and be able to go for these distinctive features in the land. And I felt very proud of myself because I was like, okay, I memorized it. I knew what I was looking for. And so I did feel like a very accomplished outdoors woman.
Oh, good. You should.
And it really wasn't that bad to follow. There were quite a few cairns, but I guess what makes it harder is that it is so rocky that there is no trail. There's nothing that you can follow where you're like, okay, this is the trail. The only way that you're navigating on this trail is the cairns, the stacks of rocks. And the terrain undulates so much. It's not just a straight up, it's not a straight down, it's constant up and down, up and down, up and down, that you don't have a clear line that you're following. You're basically walking from one cairn to the next, pausing and looking for the next one because the terrain changes so much on that point in the trail.
Yeah, it's definitely slower going on trails like that because you do have to take your time and you don't want to get in a hurry or assume that you are going in the right direction until you've identified the next cairn. So always a challenge and always takes longer than you think it's going to.
Yeah, and of note, I really didn't notice any major trail maintenance that had gone on, like this trail guy had promised me. I kept looking for it, and I just didn't see it until I got to the actual overlook of the falls.
Well, how was the overlook?
I loved it the first time we were on it when all of us were out there. That was really incredible. This time, again, I wasn't feeling it. I didn't enjoy it. I was kind of like, oh, I'm here. Yep, I've seen this before. I guess let's keep moving on.
Well, harsh, harsh. It is a very cool spot for anyone who hasn't been there before. It's really, I think it's worth visiting and worth seeing.
Yeah, it's phenomenal when you're in a good headspace and or when you haven't seen it before. You're up on this ridge line looking down into this canyon, looking at where water used to flow, like where water cut through this canyon and created like is the word concave, convex that goes into the
It
wall?
be concave.
Concave, this concave hole in this canyon. And it must get a little bit wet, or maybe it's still wet down there. I don't know because there's ferns growing around in it.
Yeah.
And so you're just looking at something that you know is an incredible natural feature. Like it is really, really cool. And I think had I been in the right headspace, I would have sat there and maybe journaled and enjoyed and stuff, but that was not happening this time.
All right. Well, let's keep it trucking then. So you head on past Mexicano Falls, and where to next?
I was going to go to all these overlooks. There's like 3 overlooks past the Mexicano Falls, the actual overlook itself. So I knew I needed to head towards the Mexicano Falls trailhead that people can drive to when they have a Jeep. Hint, hint. But I was really nervous because this map that I had planned my route on, all of a sudden I didn't feel like I could trust because the ranger had told me, oh, these don't actually connect. And that's my detailed map that I had planned to navigate off of. And the exploration map that I had is like shit for this area. You cannot tell anything.
Right.
Like, it's impossible. And then Gaia, when I was pulling up, Gaia was showing me that I was on like 4x4 roads. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know what to trust. Like, I don't actually know. I think I know where I am on the map, but I don't feel confident that I know where I am on this map. And so my anxiety is just kind of rising and rising as I'm heading away from the falls. I make it to the Mexicano Falls trailhead. And I did keep going from there, but I was just getting more and more anxious about being able to wayfind.
All right. So what did you do?
I kept pushing on for a little while. At one point, I was kind of going downhill and I could see like all of the scenery just opening up and I could kind of see the trail stretching downward. And okay, I'm probably headed, where I can't basically where there's a cliff. And so like, okay, that's pretty easy to find that. Like I can see the trail from here. But all of a sudden I just got so anxious and I kind of stopped walking and I was like, this is really pretty, but I can see it from up here. I'm not going to make it to the Madrid Falls. Like, there's just no way that from these overlooks, I'm then going to carry on and do the Madrid Falls, which is what I had really wanted to do on my original hike. And I kind of thought, are you having fun? And I'm like, no, I'm not having fun. This is awful. I'm ready to go back. And so just like that, I was like, okay, I'm turning around and I'm going back.
Yeah. So I kind of wanted to ask because I think that's sort of an important thing to make note of, that I think a lot of times people can really easily push themselves to to do something because they committed to doing it. But, you're not out there hiking because there's some commitment, unless I don't know who's a paid professional hiker, that's out there. But for the rest of us, you're out there because you want to have fun, because you want to experience nature. And I think if you're not enjoying it, or if you're feeling anxious, feeling unsafe in any way, feeling uncertain, there's nothing wrong with just turning around, right? You're not proving anything to anyone by continuing on. And if anything, like that's how people end up stranded in the desert for 5 days, is they don't stop when they're uncertain and turn back and go back to where they feel certain. Sometimes that's all the way back to the trailhead. You have to be ready to bail out, especially on these backcountry trails where the navigation is already sort of, an uncertain experience. And if you're not in the mental place to enjoy that stress, because that is, that's one of the reasons I like navigating, is because it is to some extent a stressful experience. It pushes me to use every faculty to reason and think and be observant and be alert. It's, it can be exhausting to navigate all day, but it's a challenge that I enjoy unless I'm, in a really terrible mood. And then maybe I'm like, I actually don't feel like navigating all day. Let's just use the app. Or, maybe let's not do a crazy challenging hike.
Or maybe tell somebody that they have their own map.
Or maybe tell somebody that they have their own fucking map and they can navigate for themselves. Yeah, sure. We'll tell that story another time.
We certainly will. But yeah, and that's not like an excuse to bitch out or to take it easy because there's a difference between being tired or it's been a long hike or you're a little bit worried or whatever and you just kind of push through that. But this was different than anything else that I typically feel. And when I thought about, am I having fun? The answer was absolutely no. There's no point in me doing this. And for me, it's really hard to tell the difference between anxiety and intuition. And in a place like Big Bend Ranch State Park, if I feel unsafe, I'm going to turn around because I'm a conservative hiker like that.
Yeah. Well, it's the people who don't take unnecessary risks that always come back. So, anyways, you make it back to the car. You take, I think, a fat nap, I assume, in the car and head on. Or what's next here?
Well, actually, I had a little snafu, I think, right where you and I did on the
That's
Mexicano
right.
Falls. Yeah.
This is a tough section.
It really is. So, once I got back to the overlook, I'm like, okay, now I have to be on my A game. I have to be paying attention. And like, I kind of snapped back into a more alert, more dialed in mindset. And so I was super focused on finding these cairns and paying attention. And I was doing okay. And then all of a sudden I get to a cairn and I don't see any other cairns. And it's a very kind of the terrain's going up and down and up and down. So I can't really see very far to look for a cairn. And I'm looking everywhere and I don't see it. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to take any chances. Let me just pull Gaia out here real quick. And I pull out Gaia and the little arrow that shows you where you are was still showing that I was back by the trailhead. It was nowhere near to being accurate. And I knew it wasn't accurate. So, okay, no big deal. I just need to close the app and it'll find me on this map. So I do that. Nope. It's still not showing where I am. And then I turn off the whole damn phone and turn it back on, convinced that this is going to fix it. Nope. It's still not showing me where I actually am on the map. And this is when I start to be like, why would it do this at this point? Like, oh my God, of all the places.
Right.
I haven't pulled Gaia out once on this hike. And the one time I do, here it is. And so my first thought is, okay, don't tell Jon. Don't tell Jon unless there's actually a problem because I wanted to bivvy you and be like, oh my gosh, I just stopped working and I can't see the next cairn. Like, no, don't do that. So there's a real problem.
Boy.
And so then, like you mentioned, it's a very disorienting area because I wanted to go left, which is kind of like uphill. And so I kind of started to walk a little bit to the left, like thinking if I just moved 10, 20, 30 feet, that I would see a cairn and then be able to go. And I probably get 50 feet from that cairn going to the left. And I'm like, there's no cairns. I need to go back to the last cairn that I knew of. I can't just start, I really just wanted to start plowing ahead because you know roughly what direction you need to go in. And if push came to shove, you probably could just plow your way through it. It would be hard because of the terrain and all the vegetation and stuff.
There'd be a lot of bushwhacking, probably a few cactus spines in you, but you could do it.
It would be super slow too. And it's hard because you can't see your goal towards what you're going. So it wasn't like I could look at those terrain features that I had so smartly memorized and head towards them. No, they're fucking out of sight. I'm not going to see them for hours if I start bushwhacking. So I went back to the place where I had the last cairn I had seen. I started looking more. I turned on a bivvy track so that way I would have a map going in case I really got turned around. And I started looking down to the right, which takes you down towards the canyon. And lo and behold, there's a cairn down towards the right, which when you're out there, it feels very wrong and very counterintuitive that you would go that way. It doesn't feel right at all.
Yeah. I think there's just something about the terrain that makes you want to veer to the left, but you actually are aiming to go a bit downhill there. And so you do find the cairn and you end up being able to find the rest of them.
Yes, yes. From there on out, I found all the rest of the cairns.
I'm not podcasting with your ghost.
You're
Thank
not.
fuck.
And so once I got back down into Arroyo Mexicano, that's where the navigation gets easy. And I was like, okay, cool. I can coast now, basically. And so yes, when I got to the car, I took a big old nap. And it was so freeing because I didn't even turn on an alarm. It's like it doesn't matter. Whatever time I get up is when I get up, and then I'm going to go to my campsite from there. And so that was really nice. I passed out for a while.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you needed it after the day that you'd had and the night that you'd had before. Pretty stressful. Okay. Well, very nice. And from there, I think you head to South Leyva and set up a campsite, and it's another night in the desert.
It is. The different thing about South Leyva is it is a campsite for with multiple sites. And so there were people around, not a lot of them, but I guess I shouldn't have felt safer with lots of people or some people around, but I did for whatever stupid reason because, people are the ones who are most likely to harm you. And I did some stargazing in my hammock while I froze my ass off. And then I went to bed.
Okay. Another night in the dark in the desert, this time in a tent, I think.
No, I was actually still in the car.
Oh, still doing the car camping. Okay. So the tent stayed put away.
It did.
It was supposed to get a whole bunch of use this trip, and it did not.
Yeah, another time. So yeah, I slept in, as much as you can when the sun comes up at, I don't know, whatever time. I was up by 7. But so then I still wasn't sure what I was going to do for that day because originally I had wanted to go back to the Puerto Chilicote trailhead and go hike the West Rim Overlook and find the fucking section of trail that they didn't maintain and prove to myself that I could do it. And somehow this felt safer to me doing it as an out and back day trip rather than incorporating it into a backpacking loop. So that was my logic there. I did think like, whoa, should I even do this? And like, no, I think I can do it. I really do. And going downhill, it's going to be really easy. So I scope it out going downhill. And then once I know it, I can get back up it, even though navigating uphill is a little bit more challenging. But anyhow, I woke up after having a bad day, the day before, and was like, I don't want to do that. I'm not feeling it. And I thought, what would make me happy? And I said, I want to do something new. I want to do something different, which, changing your hiking plans is never a good idea because, whoa, what if I forget to tell you every little detail and then you send search and rescue to the wrong place because I didn't tell you what trail I was going to be on? So that's always really scary.
Yeah, that is something that we do as well, right? As you have a written hiking plan that you leave with me and then visible in your car so that people who might be looking for you can have some idea where you are and when you left to get there. So yeah, this was definitely a bit of a riskier decision to change your plans. I think you did text me.
I did. I told you where I was going to be. I just don't like changing my fucking plans. I like making a plan and sticking to the plan. Execute the plan. That is the definition of success, but not this trip. So I decided I'd do this trail called Horse Trap Trail, which my friend Kimberly and I had tried to attempt in our first trip out to the state park. We tried to mountain bike it. And so it wasn't going to be completely new, but we had failed. We had turned around. And so I knew I hadn't seen most of this trail. So I get out on the trail and I'm hiking along and it's surprisingly beautiful. Like there's some really great vistas of the mountains. You feel completely alone, but it was great. It was enjoyable. I was like, okay, at some point I'm going to start recognizing the trail because I've been on a section of this trail with my friend.
Right.
And I keep looking and I keep looking, and I have a fairly good memory for trails. Like, I don't remember them completely, but when I am on them, I will recognize parts of them. And I'm not recognizing any of it. And I thought, okay, well, we must have started from the other end because it's it's almost a loop, but not quite. You start at one trailhead, you end at another trailhead.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's not really a horseshoe shape because it's real squiggly, I think, but it's more, you could call it a horseshoe in terms of where the start and the end are.
And so I'm like, okay, well, we must have started at the other end. I'm not going to recognize any of it until I'm finishing the trail. I don't remember how far we got on it. Well, as I get to the very last section of trail, I start to realize I didn't recognize any of it.
Yeah.
And I remembered being in a sandy, like a wash, some sort of creek bed or something with her, and struggling to ride the bike because it was sandy and gravelly and there wasn't hard footing underneath. And there was no such thing that I encountered on Horse Trap Trail. And so as I got off the trail, I realized, my gosh, I don't know where we were, but we were not on this trail.
Yeah.
And what had happened when we tried to mountain bike it, we weren't confident in our navigation skills. We knew, like, hey, this is actually really hard to find. Like, we're having a really hard time keeping the trail. And so I remember that we dragged some branches and made an arrow or something to point us in the right direction. And we did that a couple of times because we were so unsure of the trail. And at one point I was like, we're never going to get, it's about a 5-mile horseshoe, if you want to call it that. I'm like, we're never going to make this in the time. We told y'all we'd be back at like 2 or 3 o'clock and contact the Rangers if we weren't back. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want the Rangers contacted to come find us unless we actually need it. So I'm like, no, we need to turn around. And we both agreed we needed to turn around and go back because we couldn't follow this trail.
Yeah. No wonder.
Yeah, right?
You were literally just in a creek bed.
Yes. It was hilarious in hindsight to realize this, but also like terrifying to realize we could have been the next Kathy Fries.
Yeah. Yeah. You could well have been lost in the desert, and we would have been saying you were on some trail that you were not on.
We were in the vicinity, so they probably would have found us eventually.
I'll bet people wander down that creek bed all the time, but
I don't see how. Okay, I know we did it, but I really am confused about how we did it. But anyhow, whatever.
it's a good thing that your navigational skills have improved since then. That was a few years back, so.
Yeah, I think that was in, what is it, 21? I think that was.
Seems right, yeah.
Yes, much more proficient at navigating, much more prepared. I think all we had for a map was the little pamphlet that the Rangers give you. We didn't have an emergency device.
Really Kathy frying it up there.
Oh, we really were frying it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I shouldn't make fun, but she did make it. So
she did. Go read her story, and I think it's Texas Monthly. It's a crazy, crazy story.
Yeah. Yeah. I joke because it is terrifying, and because I am in situations where that's a possibility. Right. Often enough that I feel like I have to joke about it. Anyways, okay. I'm glad that no one was harmed in the making of this podcast. So you hiked Horse Trap Trail for the first time.
Yes, indeed, I did.
Congratulations. Sounds lovely. I feel like I kind of want to do it now, but
yeah, definitely worthwhile.
All right. So you've got a few more trails that you were able to squeeze out of this trip here. What else do we have left to cover?
Yeah, so I did the Encino Loop. Is I think a 8 or 9 mile loop. I didn't read the pamphlet until I was actually out on the trail, and the pamphlet goes, oh yeah, usually this is done by mountain bikers because it's not as pretty as some of the ones like Horse Trap Trail. And I was like, oh fuck, why am I on this trail? But I was already on it at that point, and I was actually having a good day and feeling it, and like, well, it'll be fine. But kind of the fun thing about this trail was to get to the actual trailhead, I was going to need to go on a high clearance road. And I talked to the ranger, and she's like, yeah, don't do that with your car. And which I appreciate, like, that the rangers know the road conditions and will be honest with you. She's like, you might get into trouble. And so I was like, okay, well, what can I do? And so she gave me one option where I could drive way, way further and park at a campsite that wasn't occupied where I could access the trail. Or she's like, if there's any bulldozed off spots from the main road, you're allowed to park in these like bulldozed spots. She's like, I think there's one here. And she showed me on the map. So I'm like, okay, that's what I'd really like to do. So I found this little bulldozed off spot and pulled over onto it. But parking here meant that I didn't have direct access to the trail. I was going to have to bushwhack. I didn't know how far because I couldn't tell on the scale of the map because my navigational skills aren't that proficient yet. But it wasn't that far.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I looked at the terrain features. I looked at where the car was. I looked at where the park road was. And I was like, okay, I just need, to go straight towards these power lines. And when I come back, right where the trail bends, I jet out towards there were 2 mountains that kind of sloped down toward each other. I'm like, okay, that's what I'm looking for when I come back. And so I'm like, okay, I think I can bushwhack. This is my first time bushwhacking. I don't usually bushwhack. I stay on the trails, and in many state parks, bushwhacking is frowned upon. It's not at this particular park.
Yeah, and just to be clear, if you're listening and you don't know what bushwhacking is, Google is a thing. No, I'm kidding. You actually could just use a dictionary too. But anyways, no, it just means going off trail, like through rough terrain. Normally, it's something that you would only do if you're using a map and compass to navigate, and you are taking a bearing and following the heading using your compass, and very likely either tracking your distance or using some kind of like a backstop or a handrail. If I'm throwing these terms out and they don't make any sense, you should not bushwhack under any circumstances.
Well, I had a compass in my backpack and I had a map in my hand, and my brain turns off anytime that you tell me how to take a bearings. But
That's true.
I had a number of those things in place, so I knew I was going to be fine. Oh,
Well, I think you understand a lot of the principles of navigation, even if you are absolutely hopeless when it comes to taking a bearing. So, the more important things are, understanding your location in the real world in relation
I'm
to
pretty good at that.
landmarks. And yeah, I think you're very good at that. It's when you start trying to translate that to paper and magnets that things get confusing. But
My feminine intuition comes through on the trail.
okay.
The feminine mystique. But
Yes.
anyhow, I successfully bushwhacked onto the trail and then off of the trail back to my car when it came to it. Great trail for mountain biking, but I would agree it's not worth your time to hike it on foot.
Well, fair enough. We'll have to take the bikes.
Yes.
Well, I did want to say it's actually really good to know that you are allowed to park in those pull offs that they've bulldozed, because I did not know that. And there are a lot of them around the park,
Yeah.
often pretty close to trailheads that don't have a lot of parking.
Yeah, the trailheads at Big Bend Ranch State Park.
Yeah, to clarify.
Because, yeah, we can't just call it Big Bend because people are going to get confused. But yeah, the trailheads are really small. Sometimes they're non-existent. Like Horse Trap didn't have a trailhead.
All right, sometimes the trail just starts off the side of the road.
Yeah, and so I was like, well, I see the trailhead for Encino, but I can't access it. And so I asked the ranger, like, hey, and she was the one who brought up the pull-offs or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it feels a little weird and random to just pull off on this bulldoze section and you're like shut in by all these sharp plants and stuff. You can't even get into your car hardly without getting assaulted by all sorts of prickly things. But I guess that's the price you pay for that solitude.
I think it probably only feels weird because you're driving a Honda Pilot. I think if you were in a 4Runner or a Jeep, it would feel like natural. In fact, I think it would feel right.
Feel right and just.
Yeah, I think you would feel like morally good about it. Anyways.
Yeah, one time when I came out of the ranger station, I walked out, and when I had pulled in, there weren't that many cars at the ranger station, but I had been there for 15 minutes. I walk out and I was like, oh my God, I feel so out of place because there's probably 6 or 7 cars parked there, and they are all souped up Jeeps, 4Runners that are jacked up. They've got the water canteens strapped on their side. They've got everything to show you that these are the people who are like, they're going into the heart of Big Bend.
Yeah.
They're driving to those campsites that I was going to backpack to. And then there I am in my little 2-wheel drive Honda Pilot, like, hey guys, don't mind me.
One day we'll upgrade. But in the meantime, we'll hoof it the old-fashioned way.
So I drove to my campsite, which was one of the solitary campsites. It's called Los Ojitos. It was further off the park road than Rancho Viejo had been. I think it was almost a mile. And I had verified with the rangers, hey, can I get to this in a regular car? And they're like, yes. And I could, but it was a lot rougher than I was comfortable with. And again, this is me who's scared of having to change a tire out there by myself and then have to drive over still 20 miles of gravel road on a spare tire if I can actually change the damn tire.
Yeah, we should probably take some time out one of these weekends and just go and have you take the tire off and put it back on.
I YouTubed it, so theoretically I know how to do it. But yes, we probably should do that. But anyhow,
it's a good workout if nothing else.
I didn't love driving to my campsite, and that's unfortunate because I had planned to drive from my campsite to the Cinco Tenejas trailhead, which was close to my campsite. And I was like, nope, I don't want to have to drive down that road and back up it again. Like, I have to leave in the morning to come back home to my fucking husband. But That's the only one. That's the only other time I want to
Yeah.
drive down this road.
I'm worth it. Cinco Tenejas, not so much.
Exactly. And so I was like, but I really want to go to this Tenejas because these Tenejas have eluded us over the course of being at this trail twice. We still hadn't managed to actually see the Tenejas.
So I dispute this point.
Okay, well, hold on. Let's start with, for people who might not know, what even is a Tenejas?
So it's like a rock pool. Basically, it's an area of hard rock where water gathers in the desert, and I mean that's more or less it, right? And so Cinco suggests that there's 5 of them. I think that's probably some pretty loose math. There's a whole bunch of them in there, and depending on exactly what you count as a rock pool, maybe there's 5, maybe there's 10. I don't know. There's a bunch. They are very cool, and there's a way to approach them where you go down the cliff side, which is a trail. It's an actual trail. And loops on and actually ultimately connects, if you follow it, to another campsite, although it's quite a hike to get to that. Anyways, from the trailhead, you can very easily go down the cliff and hike up to what I think of as the front of the Tenejas. And if you are, moderately competent rock scrambler, or climber, you can have a little fun in the area because it's a lot of very smooth, hard rock. And so, we've explored a little bit and we've seen some rock pools for sure.
Yeah, I think there's 2 rock pools that we've seen down there.
Yeah, so maybe we haven't seen all 5 from there.
Yeah, but we always thought that this was the trail because so the one that goes down, it kind of hooks around to the right, and then you can climb up.
It takes you right to them, yeah.
It does. It takes you right to the 2 that you can see pretty easily with a little bit of scrambling.
And we originally went that way because when we first went here, I had Googled how to get there, and I had read some things online of people telling me, go to the bottom of the cliff and turn right, and you'll be right there. It takes no time at all.
Well, that's how you see part of them. But we didn't realize it wasn't until after our second trip to the Tenejas, I was looking at a topographical map and looking at some other people's pictures. And I went, John, we haven't seen the Tenejas. And I just couldn't believe that we've been there twice and just utterly failed to really have the whole Cinco Tenejas experience.
Okay. So apparently I navigated wrong is what I've heard. I haven't been out there to have this shown to me in person, but I've been told that I made a mistake. And so I'm excited to hear what the right way is.
Well, your wee little wife found them, and I can't use a compass hardly to save my life. So
literally.
All right. Instead of driving, it was going to be 1.3 miles to get to the Cinco Tenejas trailhead from my campsite. I was like, nope, not going to do that. I'll walk it in the heat of the desert day. So I had this button-up cotton shirt that I was wearing when it was really hot and my skin needed protection, but I also didn't want to be hot. And I tied it up on my head to protect my neck and my shoulders, and I hit the road. And as I'm walking down the main park road, once I get off of the road to my campsite, there's Jeeps and 4Runners blowing by me, and nobody stopped to ask if I was okay, which I thought was a little bit weird. So that happened. But then I get to the trailhead, I take it, and instead of going down toward the canyon, I branched off to the right and went up.
Right.
And we had done that before, and you get a nice overlook into the canyon. Like, it's really a phenomenal view.
Yeah, the cliffs up there are great. This is a great place if you have some kids and you want to do a relatively short, relatively easy hike and have a nice overlook. You don't go down the cliff with the little kids. You just go to the overlook, you hang out, and you turn back.
You could go down to the cliff with the kids because it's not that hard to get to the base of them.
Up, though.
Yeah, I guess maybe so.
Coming up's a bit of a climb. You know your own kids. Be the judge. You'll see what we're talking about if you go there, and you can make your own decisions.
Now, if you just keep going past what you think is the overlook,
yeah,
there's some cairns, and you can see that some feet have traveled here. And if you look on your map, your Gaia map, I mean,
not your paper map.
I'll
tell you that.
Map, but if you look on your navigational app,
on the paper map, it doesn't connect.
It's not. I'm not saying it connects.
I know. That's a callback, folks.
Okay, I got up with the program. Anyhow, once you kind of follow these cairns and you look at where other people's feet have been, all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, here's the back of the canyon. Oh my God, here's all these Tenejos that you're seeing from up above. And these were the Tenejos I had seen in the pictures. This is kind of what I expected to see when I'm told that I'm going to see a Tenejos. It's these pools of like emerald green water, which is probably so full of bacteria. But it was really, really incredible. And it was a lot more narrow back there in the canyon than where we had approached it from the base of the canyon. So it was really, really cool. I didn't have the balls to go down and check them out on foot because, there's so many things that could go wrong in my paranoid mind. Mountain lions are probably down there because there's water, and that means there's a prey source. And my SOS device isn't going to work down in the canyon. And what if I can't find my way up? And, just what if I accidentally down climb and can't up climb again? And I'm one of those people who's stuck in the Tenejos and just, I guess it would take me a long time to die out there because I'd have water.
Right up until you puked it all out.
Yeah, but a satellite device is not going to work inside a canyon, so then you're fucked.
Yeah, very challenging to get a satellite signal inside a narrow, like a slot canyon. Like I would imagine the ones in the back there would be. Yeah, we'll have to check it out together. It's always that's one of those things where again, I think if you're by yourself, great decision to not go ahead and do the risky thing. I think if you are there with a group of people and you're able to check it out and you want to maybe, climb down a little ways to somewhere that might be difficult to get out of, you have to judge your own abilities. You just don't all go down together at once. You make sure that there are people there who can get you out.
Well, and it didn't even look like it was that hard of climbing. I was just kind of
You were
paranoid.
just paranoid.
Yeah, if we're honest,
It was a bit of a paranoid trip.
it was.
You were off on the wrong foot. I don't hold that against you. I'm not going to judge you.
Other people might.
Well, as long as they leave a 5-star, rating, they can say whatever they like. Okay, well, that's the Tenejos, and I think that's pretty much it, right? So you
Yeah.
camp out one more night and zoom home in the morning at a blistering 10 miles an hour through the gravel roads, and
Yeah, it took me 3 hours to get out of that damn park.
it always takes so long. But, on the bright side, at least you're in a Honda Pilot and not trying to drive like with a camper attached to your vehicle or something.
Yeah, that would be a terrible idea to ever try to take an RV into the interior of the park.
I hope nobody ever listens to this who attempted to take an RV into the interior of Big Bend Ranch, because I would feel so bad that we were making fun of them for doing that. All right, well, let's close it out. Any final thoughts, takeaways, carry on gear from this trip to share?
No, I don't think so. I'd like to redo it at some point, and maybe have my plans not fall through so that I can have a trip where it's feels a little bit more organized. I'm a little less stressed and paranoid. But I'm really proud that I finally just did it and went into a park that I was terrified to go into by myself. I feel a lot more confident that I was able to navigate on all the trails and really didn't have major navigation issues. For anybody considering going into the park, whether by themselves or with a group, you need to do your own research. You need to know what you need to have to get into this park if you're going into the interior, because it's involved. This is not your average state park. There's a lot that goes into getting into the interior of the park, and we'll talk about that one day. But just know you cannot just drive into the heart of Big Bend. You're not going to have a fun time if you do that.
Yeah, there a lot of parks, I see folks, they show up and they walk out onto the trail with one bottle of water between two people and somebody's in flip-flops. And I'm just like, all right, well, hopefully you're not going to be out here for too long. But you try to do that in Big Bend Ranch State Park, and I think you are asking for bad things to happen to you. There is not a lot of shelter on most of these trails. Like, yeah, you gotta be prepared if you're gonna go into the backcountry.
Yeah, you do. And you need to be prepared for what if your car breaks down. And the kind of person who's going to try to hike in flip flops with one bottle of water doesn't even know that they're going to be driving on 20 miles of gravel road, So there's a lot of logistics to take into account. And there's no water except at Sauce. Just lots of things that we'll talk about.
Yeah. Well, I suspect and hope that anybody who has found this podcast is the kind of person who's going to do their own research and is going to have a great time because they show up prepared to kick ass and take names.
And I think that's the kind of person who's going to appreciate my anxiety and paranoia. So thank you very much for that.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to a close. This has been another episode of This Fucking Trail.
Happy trails.